We're going to be talking Philadelphia Eagles football again, as the Eagles have a big question on their hands whether they're going to roll with the young Jalen Hurts or trade for a veteran quarterback. We're also going to be giving a recap of the NFC and AFC championship games. It was a great weekend of football. The Sixers, they're now a game and a half from the first place spot in the Eastern Conference. And the Philadelphia Flyers, they finally broke that 13-game losing streak. All that coming to you on Sports Talk Philadelphia. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. I'm your host for another episode, Caleb Flieger. I'm joined by my co-producer, Aiden Siksinski. Aiden, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty well today, Caleb.
And we have a new face on the Sports Talk Philadelphia panel, Matt Dorenzo. Matt, how are we doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here, Caleb.
Nice. So we're going to jump right into Philadelphia Eagles football. I know the season's done, but there's still a lot to talk about with Eagles. They do have an interesting QB controversy on their hands. They can either roll with the 23-year-old Jalen Hurts, who has a $1.5 million cap hit next year and could build the team around him with the draft capital that they have, or there's plenty of other quarterback options that the Eagles can go. You have Deshaun Watson, you have Russell Wilson, who's won a Super Bowl before, Aaron Rodgers, who's won a Super Bowl before. So there's not many times in the offseason where you have two Super Bowl winning quarterbacks on the market to trade for like that. So definitely a lot of options for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. If you do look at it, I mean, obviously Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers have been in the league longer. I mean, 33 and 38 years old. A guy like Deshaun Watson does have a lot of legal actions right now that he has to get sorted out, but a young quarterback who has shown a lot of talent throughout his young career so far. So I'm going to open up to you guys. Where do you think the Eagles and what type of direction are they going to go this offseason with their quarterback position?
Yeah, so I think at this point they're definitely looking at someone outside the organization. I think that if no one else is available, or if they look at the cap hits and decide maybe not to go that route, I think they stick with Jalen Hurts. But at this point, I think Howie Roseman has made it very clear that he's looking at all possible options at the quarterback position.
See, the thing with Howie Roseman is he always tries to play the long game and tries to go the strategic route. But in my opinion, I think we should stick with Jalen Hurts, 23-year-old quarterback with the least cap fit on the market. And right now, playoff win, we were supposed to go 3-14 and led us to the playoff win. Unfortunately, we did lose to Tom Brady, but it is Tom Brady. He's the greatest of all time. So right now, with Jalen Hurts' cap space and his hit, just build a team around him and see what we can do in the offseason.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, especially if you look at Brandon Graham, who was on Sports Talk Radio 94 WIP the other day. He's a weekly talk show host for that show over there. He was discussing the quarterback option with Jalen Hurts and kind of how the organization is giving an outlook on it so far. And he did say at the end of that call that you never know what Howie Roseman, the GM of the Philadelphia Eagles, he's been very predictable during his tenure with the Eagles. So you do never know what kind of direction the Eagles are going to go. Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni did say in the press conference after the season was over that Jalen knows that he's their guy. So we'll see how long that should stick with them. There's also some potential first-round quarterbacks that could be in the question for the Philadelphia Eagles because they do have 3 first-round draft picks. Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh, who was pretty impressive and led Pitt to a top 10 ranking this year. You also have Matt Corral from Ole Miss, who looks like he's leading the way for the number 1 spot for those quarterbacks. Malik Willis from Liberty, who's looks like he's got potential, but he'll take a few years to actually get going. And then you also have Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. I know a lot of analysts are saying that this is a very weak quarterback draft class compared to other years where you have guys like Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, who are the undefiable number 1 overall pick. You don't have that this year. So do you think is there any way that Howie Roseman can use one of those first-round picks that the Eagles have to draft a guy? Because those first-round picks are later in the draft.
You know, I think they absolutely can. I don't see many of these quarterbacks being drafted in the top 10. So there'll definitely be at least 1 or 2 of those guys available. I think another option the Eagles can look at is on either the second or third day of the draft. Bailey Zappi, who was the quarterback at Western Kentucky, this dude was on fire this year. He led the NCAA in attempts, touchdowns with 62, and yards with nearly 6,000. And those passing touchdowns broke Burrow's record that he set at LSU. So it does look like that if the Eagles want to wait for a guy later in the draft who actually might be pretty solid, they absolutely can. I also think that they definitely are looking at using one of those picks for the quarterback.
If the Eagles do decide to go quarterback in the first round of the draft, I really like Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh. He showed great poise and great confidences, and he patented the fake slide that was all over the news and brick media. So with a quarterback like that, with a mindset like that, I do agree if the Eagles do decide to move on from Jalen Hurts and go through the draft, Kenny Pickett should be our guy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kenny Pickett, he did change the rule book, so he's making changes to the rules, and you got to love a player like that. So definitely some potential there for the first-round quarterbacks. Like I said, the Eagles do have 3 first-round draft picks this year. That's not very common for teams like that. I think the last team to do that was the Las Vegas Raiders now, and they didn't do a very good job at it. The Eagles' picks are 15, 16, and 19. 15 and 16 were from trades with the Indianapolis Colts and the Miami Dolphins. The 19th pick belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles. Like Matt said, there are a lot of positions that the Eagles need to fill this offseason. You've noticed that we need an edge rusher. Brandon Brooks retiring, and with Jason Kelsey's retirement pondering, the offensive line is also a question now. Another weapon for that offense with Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith would also be a good addition for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I want to open it up to you guys. Are there any specific prospects that you guys are eyeing up, and what do you think is kind of the biggest position that the Eagles need to attack in this draft?
So I'll go biggest position with that question. I think the biggest position at this point, I talked a little bit about it last week. Definitely linebacker is a big one. And I think somewhere in the offensive line they absolutely need. I think that they can move Landon Dickinson over the center if they absolutely have to. But I think you're either looking at the center position or the left guard position.
So with the Eagles, I was eyeing up Nakobe Dean, linebacker from Georgia, with the 15th or 16th overall pick. He showed great poise and leadership in the national championship game for Georgia. And honestly, with the 16th and 19th, I say we can go after Calvin Ridley or Allen Robinson, trying to package a jewel with that and get a stud wide receiver alongside Devontae Smith.
Yeah, the Eagles have been known for not drafting linebackers in the first round of the draft, and we saw from this past year that the Eagles linebackers ranked towards the bottom of the league with Alex Singleton and T.J. Edwards. T.J. Edwards did earn a contract extension last year, but only for 1 year, so obviously not a long-term thing. Like Matt said, Nakobe Dean from Georgia is a great option, and also Devin Lloyd from Utah. He's a linebacker. His position rank is second for linebacker, so he's another guy that if Nakobe Dean is gone, that he will be there probably around the Eagles pick. So definitely going to be an interesting time for Eagles draft. I mean, a lot of draft capital to play around with, so definitely going to be interesting. Now we're going to switch to the NFC and AFC championship recap. It was just overall a great weekend of football. I mean, both games went down to the wire like we assumed it would be. First, we're going to start out with the NFC. The Rams played the 49ers. Matthew Stafford, 31 of 45 for 337 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. An interesting stat with Matthew Stafford is his first 3 games with his Lions that he played most of his career for, 0-3 in the playoffs. His first season with the Rams, 3-0 in the playoffs. Just looks what you can do when you put talent around a good quarterback. Cooper Kupp, he did what he usually does, 11 receptions, 142 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Odell Beckham Jr., reviving his career with the Los Angeles Rams, 9 receptions for 113 yards, a very impressive performance from Odell. The Rams did previously lose to the 49ers twice in the regular season, so you'd have to think going into this third game, it's very hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. So you'd have to think that the Rams are going to advance to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially being a home game. Everyone's talking about how many 49ers fans are going. Rams definitely want to win this one. I think the biggest storyline out of all this, though, is the way that the Rams have made it to the Super Bowl. They have not used a first-round draft pick since drafting Jared Goff in 2016. They're not going to have one until 2024. They built this up by trading their first-round picks, by getting free agents nobody thought were good anymore. And now they're in the Super Bowl. So it clearly shows that you don't need to tank in order to make the Super Bowl. There's so many different ways to build a good team. The Rams are proving that this year.
When the Rams traded for Matthew Stafford last offseason, they were going all in. And they went. They went and got Odell Beckham Jr., a proven veteran, Von Miller, a Super Bowl MVP, and it proved all so far. So Cooper Kupp leading the way with 11 receptions for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's been their guy all season. They're going to keep feeding him. I'm just really happy for Matthew Stafford getting all the way.
Yeah, definitely happy for Matthew Stafford. He's put in his time as a quarterback and obviously earned the respect of everyone, of fans and people around the NFL. So happy to see Matthew Stafford finally make his first Super Bowl appearance there. We are going to move on to the AFC Championship game that went to overtime. A pair of teams that played previously in this season also went to overtime were the Bengals and Chiefs. Joe Burrow just impressed again. I mean, the second-year quarterback, 23 of 38, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, did have an interception. But like Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow is 3-0 in his first 3 NFL appearances in the playoffs. I mean, that's just a great stat to have for a young quarterback, especially for a guy last year who tore his ACL and came back and is having the year like he's having now. And then obviously Patrick Mahomes put up great numbers again like he always does, 26 to 39, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did have a crucial interception in overtime, which we'll discuss, but pretty much Mahomes is stopped for going to his 3rd straight Super Bowl. What do you guys think on kind of the reaction of Cincinnati for the first time? Is this the first time they're going to the Super Bowl?
No, this is not. They made it to the Super Bowl a couple other times, lost to the 49ers both times. So this will be impressive to see them playing a team, not the 49ers in the Super Bowl. I think the biggest storyline out of this entire game is how Patrick Mahomes totally just let down the Chiefs. Yes, their stats are very impressive, Caleb, but his QBR in the 4th quarter and overtime was 4.2, just absolutely terrible, let the Chiefs down. Bengals deserved to win it, but the Chiefs really lost that one.
Going into this game, we all knew how good Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs were, and they're a really hard team to beat at home. But Joe Burrow and the Bengals really showed their poise and leadership and integrity in going out there and getting a tough, hard win at Arrowhead. Like early season when these 2 plays, the Chiefs went up big at halftime, but the Bengals only held them to 3 second-half points, which they did again. The overtime win is a really good momentum shift going into the Super Bowl against the Rams.
Yeah, obviously, it was just a great momentum shift for the Bengals to win 3 straight playoff games after going 10-7 in the regular season, just one more win than the Eagles. So definitely just a great weekend of football, and looking forward to 2 weeks from now, the Super Bowl will be being played. So going to be a great time of football and going to be definitely an interesting game. Going on to Sixers talk now, the Sixers have fought their way from a game and a half behind the first-place spot in the Eastern Conference. I don't know if anyone really expected this to happen, especially with the Ben Simmons stuff coming out. But the Sixers did lose to the Wizards last night, which is a bad loss. But something I do want to talk about is that win from the night before against the Grizzlies in 122 to 119 in overtime without the Sixers MVP Joel Embiid. In that game, Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris stepped up. Tyrese Maxey, 33 points, 8 assists, 4 blocks, which was a career high for the second-year player. Tobias Harris finally showing what that contract is worth, 31 points. And then Aiden, I know you're a guy that you've been loving on whole season. Andre Drummond, 16 points and 23 rebounds. Just an awesome performance for a backup center in the absence of Joel Embiid. Just overall a great win. I mean, against a Memphis Grizzlies team who has taken a big stride forward from last year. I mean, they are a good team in the Western Conference, but the Sixers just showing some grit and showing they can get it done without their MVP.
You know, absolutely. And that's such a big piece because Embiid played 22 games in a row, and the Sixers played much better under that stretch they did early in the year when they were missing Embiid, missing Maxey, missing all these pieces. So I was interested to see how they were going to do against the Grizzlies. And the guys that needed to step up absolutely stepped up. Obviously, I love Andre Drummond, as Caleb said. I love these centers that are willing to do anything they have to do in order to win these games. The 23 rebounds is absolutely huge, especially because, as great as Embiid is, he's an offensive-first center. So to have someone like Drummond, who's a more defensive guy, more gritty in the paint, that's exactly what the Sixers are going to need going forward, especially in key playoff games.
Going into the season with the Sixers, all the drama around Ben Simmons, I wasn't really sure how they would pan out. But right now, 31-19 on the season, a game and a half behind first place. Embiid has been looked like an MVP candidate all year. Andre Drummond, like Aiden said, has been a horse on the rebounds, grit and grind. That's what I love as a basketball player. And Tyrese Maxey has a great jump up in his second year.
Yeah, we're going to keep going on Tyrese Maxey a little bit. He was named to the 2022 Rising Stars Challenge in his second year now. Tyrese Maxey, 16.9 points per game this season, pretty much 17, 4.8 assists, 3.6 rebounds per game. He is only 21 years old. He was drafted in the first round of the draft last year. He did last year show some, definitely showed some improvements. I mean, showed us that he can be that type of guy. Pretty much just open it up. Is there any way that Tyrese Maxey can be the all-star the Sixers need him to be?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with Maxey at this point, and it's a conversation that's around a lot of young players, is he has to develop a better outside shot. He's got a much better one than another Sixers point guard who I don't want to mention right now. But he can develop that even more. Last year, he really was relying on his floater shot. This year, he's definitely grinding more in the paint. So if he can get that outside shot too, with everything that he already has in his skill set, I think that can make him a potential great starter point guard in the NBA.
Tyrese Maxey has been impressive all season long. They coined him the franchise, playing alongside Joel Embiid. Him averaging 17 points in just his second year, a late first-round pick, has been really impressive, and I'm looking forward to see what we can do in the future.
Yeah, Tyrese Maxey, he did have a layup to close out that game against the Grizzlies the other night. He started pounding his chest in front of all the fans. So he's definitely taken the reins of this city. The city's fallen in love with this kid. So hopefully he can be that all-star player that we all know he can live up to be. But definitely might take a few years for him to actually step in that role because, like we said, he is 21 years old, a very young player. Going on to the other Sixers point guard, Ben Simmons, who is now still available for trade, still haven't traded him, and the deadline is very close away. It doesn't look like a trade is going to be done before the deadline. News came out that the Sixers were talking to Sacramento Kings for a while now about a possible trade with Ben Simmons. Packages were looking like Harrison Barnes, Tyrese Halliburton, and maybe an extra first-round pick. A package like that. The Sixers actually played the Kings last weekend, and Tyrese Halliburton had 38 points on the Sixers and was lighting Wells Fargo up. So you'd have to think that every fan that was sitting in Wells Fargo that night was like, we'll give Ben Simmons right now for Tyrese Halliburton, right?
Yeah, I won't read too much into it. I was interested to see what Halliburton's stats were this season. He's averaging like 17 points a game. Yeah. It's pretty much what Maxey does. So I think it was more just a motivation of like, this is what I could do for you if you had gotten me. But no, it definitely is frustrating because you see, look, at least he's on the court. Like Ben Simmons hasn't even showed up to the games. We don't really know where he is. Sometimes he's in Philly, sometimes he's in LA, like we talked about. So at least you're watching these guys on the court and being like, man, we should really have that. Or at least someone who is willing to play for the Sixers in this city.
The entire Ben Simmons situation just gets me really frustrated. He's a great player, great young defender, but everything going on with him, the drama on and off the court, I would really like them Sixers to move on with him through Sacramento or maybe even through another trade through Cleveland that I was looking at. But it looks like they're going to hold on to the offseason and possibly go after James Harden, who will be a free agent, and they're going to sign Jay with the Nets because I know Ben Simmons, he'll gladly play for Kevin Durant.
Yeah, not going to lie, if the Sixers do somewhat hold on to Ben Simmons before this trade deadline, this offseason is going to be very interesting for the Sixers. Possibly the only Sixers on the roster currently could be Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid next year. So could definitely be a whole blow-up of the organization, try to put new talent around Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. So definitely going to be an interesting time. Like I said, the Sixers are a game and a half away from first place in the Eastern Conference. They're now third place in the Eastern Conference. They were second last night before that loss to the Wizards. But as you look, the Sixers are right in the mix of things without all-star caliber player, maximum contract, just sitting on the bench. He has been fined $19 million this season, so he is getting money taken away from him. But how impressive has this run been with the Sixers? I mean, top 3 seed with no all-star caliber player. I mean, just the way Joel Embiid has changed his game this year and really just showed his straight dominance is kind of insane.
No, it definitely is, and I think it shows that Embiid can be the main focal point on the Sixers. That was always a huge question mark between him and Ben Simmons. Who's going to be the number one guy? It's clearly Embiid at this point. I do feel like the Sixers can maybe get that one spot. The Heat and the Bulls are the two teams I think are the most vulnerable in the East, and because they're ahead of us, I think we have a shot.
Joel Embiid has been our guy all season, averaging nearly 30 points. We're going on a 15-game streak with 30 points. And right now, only in reach with the number 1 seed, I do believe the Sixers can make that push late in the season.
Yeah, is there any shot that the Sixers can clinch that, not clinch, but get that number 1 seed by the All-Star break that's coming up?
I think it's possible. Again, my biggest concern is how well the Bucks are playing, because early in the season they got off to a really slow start too. I was always really concerned about the Nets and the Bucks. Nets have obviously fallen out, but Bucks I think could get that 1 seed as well.
Well, the Bulls right now, as number 1 seed, they're losing Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball. They're out for a extended period of time, so I do like the Sixers to climb up the ranks.
Yeah, Sixers definitely have an interesting chance going towards the All-Star break, so we'll keep an eye on them. Now we're going to switch to the Philadelphia Flyers that were exactly not the talk of the town for a little bit. I mean, on a 13-game losing streak, the longest in franchise history. They did break that streak, though. They're on a 2-game winning streak. They beat the Kings and the Jets. They beat the Kings 4-3 in overtime, a great overtime win there, and the Jets 3-1. So, open it up. Are the Flyers back?
No, the Flyers are as happy as I am as they finally won 2 games in a row, which I don't remember the last time they did that this season. They are definitely not back. The Eagles are still going to get talked about more, and they're in the offseason at this point. I am glad that they played well. They showed a lot more grit in these last 2 games. Someone that they brought up, Isaac Ratcliffe. He was a rookie. He brought in a lot more momentum than the Sixers or than the Flyers had on defense. Had a couple great hits in that game against the Kings. So they do finally have that young piece that we talked about last week that we didn't know that they had. Hopefully you can build on it, though.
The Flyers season just been an ultimate disappointment. 2 years ago, they're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and now after multiple 10-plus game losing streaks in the season, yes, it is a nice win, 2-game win streak, but how long will this last? At this point, I think the Flyers should just look forward to the offseason.
Yeah, it's definitely a point that they got to keep in mind here going towards the later half of the season is, do we just want to lose out? I mean, get a good draft pick and try to get some young talent in this building? Because like we were talking about last episode, the Sixers on the Phantoms right now, the Flyers on the Phantoms right now, they don't really have that young talent. I mean, like you were saying, Ian, a lot of those guys on that team are in their 30s already, so kind of guys that are going to stay towards that lower level of hockey for the rest of their career. So Flyers definitely have some questions going into that area. Do want to talk about the 2 wins that we had. Do you guys have a Flyers MVP at all? I know Cam Atkinson had 2 goals against the Kings in that overtime win. Travis Konechny had a goal in the second game. Same with Oscar Lindblom. It was nice to see him score a goal in the second game. So kind of guy that stood out for you guys at all?
Yeah, I have 2 guys. First guy in the Kings game, obviously Cam Atkinson with the 2 goals. For the second game, I'm going to give the NBC player of the game that they gave. Scott Lawton had an awesome game. Lots of great defensive plays. First, a turnover that turned into a goal. Had an assist for another goal. It was almost a goal. Great save by the Kings goalie. So I think that those 2 guys who have been pretty solid all season are my 2 players of the game for this week.
Player of the game for Game 1 has to go to Cam Atkinson. He was an all-season acquisition, and just the little wins count. It was a nice win seeing him finally getting 2 goals in there, leading the Flyers to a win. In the second game, I really liked JVR. JVR had put a goal in, leading the Flyers over, and a nice back-to-back win streak for the first time of the season.
Yeah, definitely nice to get back in the win column because 13 games, I mean, that's quite a little time. So it took the Flyers a little bit to get back in the win column, but they finally are back in the win column, and hopefully they can keep it going. We're going to move into the Flyers standings right now. I may not want to look at it, but they are 7th place in the Metropolitan Division currently. They were in 8th last week, I think. So they're not in dead last, I don't think, anymore. So they're 15, 22, and 8 on the season. They're on that 2-game win streak. What do you guys think of these standings right now? I mean, definitely the season's over, right? I mean, there's no coming back from this, not any shot.
No, not even a little bit. I guess the only silver lining to this is we're not in last, the Devils are, and we could pass the rival Islanders for 7th seed. So, hey, maybe a little bit reminder of the 80s rivalry between the Flyers and Islanders. No, I'm just kidding. But I am happy that we're out of last place. Maybe we could build on this a little bit, maybe finish somewhere in the middle of the pack by the end of the season, hopefully.
Yeah, barring a miraculous comeback for the Flyers, a miracle season, there's no way it's just too far out of reach.
Yeah, the Flyers have definitely had a disappointing season. I think we can all agree on that, especially like Matt said, 2 years ago, the #1 seed, and then going to the place we're at now is like, what the heck went wrong? I mean, the head coach that was on the team for 3 years, he got fired this season. It doesn't look like he was the problem. I mean, going on another 10-plus game losing streak, I mean, obviously you got to put that towards on the players and not the coach. So definitely an interesting time to be in the Flyers organization. I mean, they just have a lot of different things they got to choose about, and they got to think long-term, what head coach direction are they going to go towards, and also any like acquisitions that they're going to make in this offseason. What are they going to do with their young talent? I mean, a lot of young talent on that team that isn't panning out right now, so we'll see how it goes there. We are going to move to Fast Five now. Our first one, like every week, we're going to go to This Week in College Basketball with Aiden.
Yeah, so there's roughly a month and a half left before March Madness begins, end of the conference play. And there's a new #1 team that's been there for a long time, actually, Auburn. So far, their only loss of the season was to number 17 UConn. They've played a couple really strong teams in the SEC. And it's really good to see another team come back that no one was really talking about, sort of like what happened with Baylor last year. Jabri Smith is leading them in scoring 15.6 points per game. Clearly is their leader offensively. In that thought, Wendell Green is their leading assist player with 4.9 assists per game, nearly 5. So it's interesting that they have these multiple players that they're leaning on for different stats, different ways to win these games. And the team that I was really strong on at the beginning of this year, Baylor, was #1 for a really long time. They're now number 8th. I think that they could still build on this, but there is a couple other really strong teams in the Big 12. You've got Texas Tech that's pretty close to them. They're second in the Big 12 right now behind Kansas, who's 7-1 in conference play. So there are a couple other stronger teams ahead of them. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in conference play and where these teams line up in the bracket.
Yeah, definitely getting to an interesting time of the year for college basketball, especially with the next month being March coming up. So March Madness, definitely a great time of the year to watch college basketball. So definitely looking forward to that. The Winter Olympics actually started yesterday night. Aiden's going to talk about his favorite event to watch during the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, so I'm a big skiing person. I love skiing. So pretty much any skiing event that's there is available. Alpine skiing is definitely one of my favorite. I personally don't go that fast on a mountain, so I definitely can envy the people that are able to do that. The other one that is one of my favorite is just any of the trick ones, either skiing, snowboarding. I don't know how they do it personally. Just willing to put yourself in that position in the air and then being able to land it is something that is, one, incredibly dangerous that you don't get in any other sport. But two, it's just a really athletic move. Obviously, I'm huge on hockey. It's going to be interesting because the NHL has decided that they're not going to allow NHL players because they want to make up some games that were canceled in late December, early January because of COVID. So definitely with that, I want to see some of these young college players that maybe the Flyers will get try to win gold here. Obviously, you're going to look at Canada, Russia as well, always the strongest teams. And third one is definitely curling. After the United States team won curling, I want to see if they can do it again. So yeah, those are my Olympic sports.
Yeah, the Olympics are definitely a great time of the year. Next, we're going to go to Matt for NBA MVP.
Well, right now it has to be the hometown hero, Joel Embiid. He's dominant all season long, and I like a dark horse candidate, DeMar DeRozan. He came over from the Spurs in the offseason, and right now leading to the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Definitely agree with those two players. Definitely have tremendous seasons so far. Tom Brady, if it's not been clear yet, has announced his retirement after 22 seasons in the NFL. Just overall a great career for Tom Brady. I mean, 7 Super Bowl championships, no player has done. Also, the most completion percentage at a quarterback, touchdowns thrown by a quarterback, yards thrown by a quarterback. So any quarterback category you want to look at, Tom Brady leads that. He is the GOAT of football, and I think he'll always be remembered as that. I mean, I don't think in my lifetime I'll ever see a quarterback that has been that dominant and just that good in the NFL. So Tom Brady, congrats on a great career. Also, we can go around the table, not just to Matt, who will be Super Bowl MVP?
Well, right now it's between, I honestly agree, the quarterback position. So if the Bengals do end up winning, I think Joe Burrow will get it, but if the Rams do, it has to go Matthew Stafford.
Definitely going to agree with that. Going to be a great Super Bowl against two guys that are in their first Super Bowls ever. So great time of football. We're going to thank you guys for coming through Sports Talk Philadelphia again and watching us. Hope we touched on some sports that gave you guys some interest. Don't forget to follow us on our social media pages on Instagram and Twitter at Sports Talk LTV. And that's all we have for this week's episode. We'll catch you guys back next week for some more Philadelphia Sports Talk. Thank you again.